The pregnant widow lived alone on the ranch until a cowboy running from the sheriff asked for shelter. Rebecca Miller breathed heavily as she walked along the porch of the house, her hands resting on her 7-month pregnant belly. It had been 3 months since her husband Richard had passed away, leaving her alone to manage the ranch in rural Texas. That was when she heard the sound of rapidly approaching hooves. A man jumped off his panting horse and rushed toward the house, tipping his hat respectfully even in his haste. "Ma'am, for the love of God, give me shelter," he shouted, nervously glancing behind him. "The sheriff's after me, but I swear on my mother's grave I ain't done nothing wrong." Rebecca hesitated. She was a woman alone, pregnant, on an isolated ranch, but something in the man's desperate voice moved her. He looked to be about 40, his face sunburned, wearing simple cowboy clothes. "Who are you?" she asked, keeping her distance. "Michael Anderson, ma'am. I worked on ranches around these parts, but I found out things I wasn't supposed to know." The sound of more horses approaching made Michael look back again, fear written on his face. "Please, ma'am, just need a place to stay the night. I can sleep in the barn, away from the house. Won't be no trouble." Rebecca studied the man for a few seconds. There was honesty in his brown eyes, and she'd always had a good instinct for reading people. Richard used to say she could see into folks' hearts better than anyone. "Go to the barn," she said finally. "But if I hear anything strange, I've got a loaded shotgun." Michael nodded gratefully and hurried to the barn, carrying a worn leather satchel Rebecca hadn't noticed before. She went inside, locked the door, and watched through the window until there was no more movement outside. That night, Rebecca barely slept. The baby kicked restlessly as if sensing her tension. She kept thinking about Richard, how he'd always known how to handle tough situations. Now she was alone, making decisions that could affect not just her, but the child she carried. When the sun rose, she made coffee and took a cup out to the barn. Michael was awake, sitting in a corner, looking over some papers scattered on the ground. "Thank you for your kindness, ma'am." Rebecca Miller. "Ma'am Rebecca, you saved my life last night. Don't know how to thank you." She noticed the documents around him. They were old papers, some yellowed with age. "What are those?" Michael hesitated, then let out a deep sigh. "Papers I found in Sheriff Hank Thompson's office. Documents that prove he's been forging land deeds all over the county." "Forging how?" "He takes the original deeds from small ranchers, alters some details, registers them under names of folks who don't even exist, or who work for him, then charges the real owners like they're trespassers." A chill ran through Rebecca's belly, unrelated to her pregnancy. "And my ranch?" Michael looked at her with pity in his eyes. "It's on the list, ma'am. You're next." Coffee spilled from the cup, trembling in her hands. Richard had always said something was off about the land dealings around here, that too many neighbors had lost their properties under suspicious circumstances. Now it all made sense. "But why did you take these papers? Why risk it?" Michael ran a hand through his graying hair. "'Cause the sheriff took my brother's ranch 2 years ago. Said the deed was faulty, that the land wasn't his no more. My brother was so shaken he had a heart attack. Died not knowing he'd been cheated." Rebecca sat on a pile of hay, trying to take it all in. "So now what? What do we do?" "We, ma'am. You helped me learn the truth. My husband always said that justice only happens when people work together." Michael smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "Then let's fight, Mrs. Rebecca. But it won't be easy. The sheriff has many allies in town." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now continuing, the following days were tense. Michael helped Rebecca with the heaviest chores on the ranch, hauling hay, fixing fences, tending to the animals. She didn't allow him inside the house, but she brought meals to the barn where they discussed the documents and planned their next steps. Rebecca soon realized Michael wasn't just an ordinary ranch hand. He could read and write well, understood laws and rights. When she asked about it, he dodged the question, but she sensed there was more to his story than he let on. One afternoon, as Michael repaired the chicken coop roof, Rebecca felt a sharp pain in her belly. She doubled over, gripping the corral fence. "Michael!" she cried. He quickly climbed down the ladder and rushed to her. "What's wrong, Mrs. Rebecca?" I I think something's wrong with the baby." The pain grew worse. Michael helped her to the house, the first time she'd let him inside. He laid her on the bed and examined her with a calmness that surprised her. "Mrs. Rebecca, it's nothing serious. Just practice contractions. It's normal at 7 months, but you need more rest." "How do you know that?" Michael lowered his eyes. "My wife. Before she passed, she went through the same thing." Rebecca didn't press further, but she tucked the information away. There was pain in Michael's voice when he spoke of his wife. That evening, she prepared a proper dinner and invited Michael to eat inside. It was the first time she'd had company for a meal since Richard left. "Michael, I need to know more about you. If we're going up against the sheriff together, I need to trust you completely." He chewed slowly, choosing his words. "I'm not just a ranch hand, Mrs. Rebecca. I mean, I am now, but I wasn't always." "What were you before?" "A lawyer. Graduated from law school in Austin." Rebecca nearly choked on her food. "A lawyer? Then why?" "Because I lost everything. My wife, my young son, my home, my practice, all because of a powerful man who didn't like it when I defended a poor family against him." "What happened?" Michael sighed, his eyes filling with tears. "My family was coming back from town in a wagon. A terrible storm, the river flooded. The bridge was dangerous. They didn't make it across." Rebecca reached out and touched his hand across the table. "I'm so sorry, Michael. After that, I couldn't practice law anymore. Every time I stepped into a courtroom, I remembered all the families I couldn't help in time. I became a ranch hand, thought it'd be simpler. But when I saw what the sheriff did to my brother, all that anger came back. And now? Now I have a chance to use what I know about the law to help you and other families. Maybe it's my way of making peace with the past." Rebecca felt a deep connection with Michael in that moment. Both had lost loved ones. Both were trying to rebuild their lives. "Then let's study these documents properly," she said. "We'll find a way to stop the sheriff." They spent the whole night going through the papers. Michael pointed out legal irregularities, showed how signatures were forged, how dates were altered. Rebecca memorized every detail, determined not to let her ranch be stolen like so many others. The next day, their closest neighbor, Mrs. Betty, showed up at the ranch. She was a gossipy woman who always knew everything happening in the area. "Rebecca, my dear, I heard there's a dangerous man hiding here on your ranch. The sheriff was in town asking about him." Rebecca kept her composure. "I don't know what man you're talking about, Betty." "Someone named Michael Anderson. They say he stole important documents from the sheriff's office. They say he's dangerous. And you believe everything you hear out there." Betty moved closer, lowering her voice. "Rebecca, you're pregnant all alone. You can't take risks like this. If that man really is here, you should turn him in." "Thank you for your concern, Betty, but I can take care of myself." When the neighbor left, Rebecca hurried to the barn to tell Michael about the visit. "He's spreading word that you're dangerous. He's trying to turn the town against you." "That's to be expected," Michael said. "But this complicates things. If people believe I'm a criminal, no one will listen to what I have to say about the documents. Then we have to act fast." "I agree. But first, I need to show you something I found last night." Michael pulled a yellowed letter from the stack of documents. "This was among your husband's papers. Seems he already suspected the sheriff." Rebecca read the letter, and her hands began to tremble. It was a letter Richard had written to the district attorney in the next county, exposing irregularities in the local land deeds. The letter had never been sent. "Richard knew," she whispered. "He was investigating this before he passed. Your ranch wouldn't be next by chance, Rebecca. It'd be next because your husband was getting too close to the truth." The revelation hit Rebecca like a punch to the gut. Richard hadn't just died from a heart condition. He died worried, stressed, fighting alone against an injustice he couldn't even grasp the full scale of. "We're going to end this," she said, with a determination that surprised even herself. "We're going to finish what Richard started." Michael smiled, seeing the strength rising in the pregnant woman. "Then we need to stop playing defense and go on the attack. I know an honest judge in the next county. If we can get these documents to him..." "When do we leave?" "First thing tomorrow. But it's a 2-day trip, Rebecca. In your condition, my child will be born on land that's rightfully ours. We're making this trip. That night, they prepared for the journey. Rebecca packed the most comfortable clothes. Michael checked the wagon and horses. Both knew it was a risk, but staying put meant certain defeat. In the morning, just as they were about to leave, they heard the sound of approaching horses. It was Sheriff Hank Thompson with 2 deputies. "Rebecca," the sheriff called, "we know you're hiding a fugitive. Hand over Michael Anderson and there'll be no trouble." Rebecca stepped onto the porch, forcing calm into her voice. "Sheriff, I don't know what man you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, ma'am. We've got witnesses who saw him here." "Witnesses or gossips?" The sheriff dismounted and walked toward the house. He was a burly man with a thick mustache, using his authority to intimidate. "Mind if I search the property?" "Not without a warrant." Michael, hidden in the barn, heard everything. He knew if he were caught there, he'd lose the documents and put Rebecca in danger. "Fine," the sheriff said. "But know this, I've got an eviction notice for your ranch. Irregularities in the deed. You've got a week to leave." Rebecca's heart raced, but she stood firm. "Let me see that notice." The sheriff handed her a paper. Rebecca skimmed it and saw it was all forged, just as Michael had explained. "This is a lie, Sheriff." "Watch your words, Rebecca. The law is the law." After the sheriff left, Rebecca ran to the barn. Michael was pale. "Did you hear everything?" "I did." He moved up the timeline. "A week isn't enough time to reach the judge and come back with a decision. Then we have to find another way. Or leave today and not return until we have a permanent solution." Rebecca looked at the ranch, at the house where she had been happy with Richard, where she had planned to raise their child. The thought of leaving everything behind, even temporarily, broke her heart. "Let's go," she said, "but we'll come back. And when we do, it'll be for good." They left in the afternoon, taking only the essentials and all the documents. The journey was harder than Rebecca had imagined. The roads were rough, the wagons swayed violently, and she felt constant discomfort in her belly. Along the way at night, the wagon wheel broke. They were on a deserted road, far from any help. "I'll try to fix it," said Michael. "But it might take a while." Rebecca climbed down from the wagon and sat on a rock, watching Michael work by the light of a lantern. The silence of the night was broken only by the sounds of animals and the noise of tools. "Michael, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you care so much about me? About my ranch? You barely know me." Michael stopped working and looked at her. "Because you reminded me that there are people worth protecting. When I saw you there, pregnant, alone, yet still willing to fight for justice, I remembered why I became a lawyer in the first place. And what was that reason? To protect those who can't protect themselves, to be a voice for the voiceless." Rebecca felt a deep emotion wash over her. It had been months since she'd felt protected, cared for. Michael wasn't just there for justice. He was there for her, too. "Michael." "Yes?" "When all this is over, what will you do?" He went back to working on the wheel, thinking about his answer. "I don't know, Rebecca. It's been so long since I've lived day by day that I've stopped making plans. Maybe it's time to start again." They reached the neighboring town by late afternoon the next day. Judge William Harrison received them in his home, a man in his 60s, with white hair and a kind but firm gaze. "So you have evidence against Sheriff Hank Thompson?" Michael presented all the documents, explained every irregularity, showed Richard's letters. The judge examined everything carefully. "These are very serious accusations. If they're true, we're talking about a corruption ring that's been operating for years." "They're true, Your Honor," said Rebecca. "My husband was investigating this before he passed. I'll need more time to review everything, and I'll need more witnesses. Do you know other families who've been wronged?" "I know several," Michael replied, "but most are too afraid to speak." "Then we'll have to convince them. Without witnesses, these documents alone may not be enough." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, back to the story. Rebecca and Michael spent the night at a simple boarding house in town. She stayed in one room, he in another, but they dined together in the common area. During the meal, Rebecca felt those pains in her belly again. "Michael, I think it's time." "What do you mean?" "The baby. It's coming." Michael turned pale. They were in a strange town, far from any of Rebecca's relatives or friends. "I'll fetch a doctor." "There's no time," she said, gripping his arm. "You'll have to help me." Michael had never assisted in a birth before, but he had been present when his own son was born. With trembling but determined hands, he helped Rebecca upstairs to the room and did what he could. The next few hours were the longest and most intense of both their lives. Rebecca fought against the pain. Michael did his best to help her, and outside, a storm was beginning to form. When the baby was finally born, a healthy, strong boy, Michael was crying just as much as Rebecca. "Why are you crying?" she asked, still breathless. Because I remembered the birth of my son, and because this boy represents hope. Hope that we can still win this fight." Rebecca looked at Michael holding her newborn son and felt something shift in her heart. It was no longer just gratitude or partnership. It was love. A love born from circumstance, but now revealed as true and deep. "What should we name him?" Michael asked. "Richard, like his father, Richard Hope Miller." They stayed in town for 3 days so Rebecca could recover from childbirth. During that time, the judge finished reviewing the documents and confirmed there were enough irregularities to file a lawsuit against the sheriff. "But we need to return to your area and gather more witnesses," the judge said. "And we need to do it quickly, before the sheriff finds out you're here." The journey back was more cautious, with frequent stops for Rebecca to tend to the baby. Michael showed surprising tenderness with the child, rocking him when he cried and singing lullabies he said he'd learned from his mother. When they arrived back near the ranch, they found the situation had worsened. The sheriff had spread word that Michael was a dangerous criminal who had kidnapped Rebecca. Some townsfolk were already searching for them. "We can't go straight to the ranch," Michael said. "Let's head to Joe's place." Joe was an elderly neighboring rancher who had always been a friend to Richard. When they reached his property, he greeted them with surprise and concern. "Rebecca, my dear, we were all worried. The sheriff said you'd been kidnapped by an outlaw." "That's a lie, Joe. Michael is an honest man, helping me uncover the truth about the land disputes." They explained everything to Joe, showed him the documents, told him about their visit to the judge. The old man fell silent for a long time, processing the information. "I always knew something was wrong," he finally said. "Too many good men lost their land under strange circumstances, but I never imagined it was such a big conspiracy." "Would you help us gather other affected families?" Michael asked. "It's dangerous. The sheriff has a lot of power around here." "I know," Rebecca said, "but if we do nothing, he'll keep stealing land from hard-working people. Should my son grow up in a world where outlaws use the law to rob honest folks?" Joe looked at the baby in Rebecca's arms and nodded. "I'll help. I know at least 5 families who've been wronged. I'll talk to them." In the following days, Joe managed to bring together 4 families willing to testify against the sheriff. They were simple, hard-working people who had lost their land and now lived as laborers on properties that had once been theirs. The meeting took place in Joe's barn on a moonless night. Along with the affected families, a few ranchers who had long suspected the sheriff's actions but lacked the courage to speak up also attended. Michael presented the evidence, explained the forgery scheme, and showed how the sheriff had been operating. The people were outraged, but also afraid. "What if he finds out we're conspiring against him?" one woman asked. "If we do nothing, he'll keep stealing from all of us," Rebecca replied. "I was in the same position, pregnant, alone, scared. But I learned that together, we're stronger." One of the men, Gerald, raised an important concern. "Even if we prove the sheriff is corrupt, who'll guarantee our safety afterward?" "He has powerful friends. Judge William Harrison is already aware of the situation," explained Michael. "He'll ensure there's a proper investigation and that the guilty are punished." "And our land, will we get it back?" "With the evidence we have and your testimonies, yes. All the forged deeds will be voided, and the properties will return to their rightful owners." Hope began to shine in the eyes of those present. After years of resignation, there was finally a real chance for justice. But in the middle of the meeting, they heard the sound of approaching horses. Everyone fell silent, fearing it might be the sheriff and his deputies. Joe went out to check and returned a few minutes later. "It's my son coming back from town, but he brings troubling news. The sheriff is gathering a group of armed men. It seems he's found out you're here." The mood of hope quickly turned to tension. If the sheriff arrived with armed men, the situation could turn very dangerous. "We have to leave," said Michael. "We can't put these families at risk." "Where do we go?" asked Rebecca, holding the baby tighter. "To the judge's town. It's the only place we'll be safe." But Gerald had a different idea. "Or we could face this once and for all. There are many of us here. If we stand together—" "No," Michael said firmly. "We won't solve this with violence. We'll use the law." Just then, Joe's youngest daughter, a girl of about 15 named Rose, rushed into the barn. "Pa, there's a man outside asking to speak to Mrs. Rebecca. Says it's urgent." Everyone tensed. It could be a trap set by the sheriff. "Who is he?" asked Joe. "He said his name is Dr. David. Came from far away." Michael and Rebecca exchanged glances. They didn't know any Dr. David. "I'll see who it is," said Michael. "I'll come too," Rebecca decided. They stepped out of the barn cautiously and saw a well-dressed man in his 50s waiting beside a well-kept wagon. "Mrs. Rebecca Miller?" he asked. "That's me. My name is David Williams. I'm a lawyer from Austin. I'm here at the request of my client, who preferred to remain anonymous." "What client?" "Someone who heard of your situation and wants to help. Someone else who's been wronged by Sheriff Hank Thompson but has the means to fight him." Michael stepped forward, suspicious. "And why didn't this person come themselves?" "Because they're a public figure, and their presence here could complicate things. But they sent me with an offer." The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out some documents. "My client is willing to fund the entire legal battle against the sheriff. They'll cover court costs, hire the best lawyers, and ensure witness protection." "In exchange for what?" asked Rebecca, always wary of offers that seemed too good to be true. "Nothing. They only want justice served, and for the sheriff to pay for all his crimes." Michael examined the documents. Everything seemed legitimate, but something bothered him. "How did your client learn about our situation? No one outside our group and the locals knows what's happening." The lawyer hesitated for a moment. "My client has informants, people who keep them updated on injustices in rural areas." Rebecca sensed there was something the man wasn't saying, but the offer was tempting. With proper resources, they could face the sheriff on equal footing. "We need to discuss this," she said. "Of course, but we don't have much time. I've heard the sheriff is organizing a group to come after you. If you accept the help, I can arrange immediate protection." Rebecca and Michael stepped aside to talk privately. "What do you think?" she asked. "It's strange, too convenient, but at the same time it might be our only chance." "Do you trust him?" "Not completely, but we don't have many options left. And if it's true, if we really have someone powerful on our side, so we accept?" "For now, yes. But we keep our eyes open." They went back to the lawyer. "We'll take the help," said Rebecca, "but we want to know who your client is. At the right time, he'll reveal himself. For now, the important thing is to get you out of here and to safety." The lawyer took them to a remote, well-kept ranch where a comfortable house was ready for them. Rebecca was impressed by the luxury of the place, but also worried. Who had this kind of money to help them? Over the next few days, while they waited for the lawyer to organize the legal strategy, Rebecca and Michael had time to talk and get to know each other better. She told him about her life with Richard, the plans they'd had for the future, how lost she'd felt since he passed. Michael shared more about his family, his former career as a lawyer, and how the tragedy had completely changed him. "You know, Rebecca, meeting you has reminded me of who I used to be. It's made me want to fight again for people who need help. And meeting you has shown me I can be strong on my own, that I can fight for my rights." One afternoon, as Michael played with little Richard in the garden, Rebecca watched from the window and felt a peace she hadn't known in a long time. It was as if she'd finally found a place where she belonged. But the calm was shattered when the lawyer David arrived with troubling news. The sheriff found out where you are. He's coming here with a group of men. We need to leave immediately." "How did he find out?" Michael asked. "I don't know, but we have to go now." They grabbed only the essentials and fled the ranch. The lawyer took them to a larger city, where they stayed in a discreet hotel. That night, Rebecca couldn't sleep. Something was wrong with the whole situation. How did the sheriff always find them? Why had David appeared so conveniently? And who was this mysterious client really? The next morning, she shared her concerns with Michael. "I'm suspicious too," he admitted. "I'll try to find out more about this David Williams." Michael left to investigate in town, leaving Rebecca at the hotel with the baby. He spoke to other lawyers, visited the courthouse, and tried to learn more about David Williams. What he discovered alarmed him. David Williams existed. He was indeed a lawyer, but he worked exclusively for one man, Colonel Cornelius Blackwell, one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the region, known for his questionable methods. When Michael returned to the hotel, he found Rebecca anxious. "What did you find out?" "The mysterious client is Colonel Blackwell, and from what I've heard, he's no benefactor. He's a man who likes to control everything and everyone." "So we're being manipulated?" "It looks that way, but I still don't know what his goal is." Just then there was a knock at the door. It was David, accompanied by an elegant man in his 60s with graying hair and an imposing presence. "Mrs. Miller, Mr. Anderson, allow me to introduce my client, Colonel Cornelius Blackwell." The colonel entered the room with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Finally, we meet in person," he said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "You've caused quite a stir in the region. What do you want with us?" Michael asked, stepping between the colonel and Rebecca. "I want to make a deal. You have something I want, and I have something you need." "What kind of deal?" "You hand over all the documents on Sheriff Thompson, and I guarantee he'll be removed from office and that you'll get your land back." Rebecca held the baby tighter. "And why do you want to get rid of the sheriff?" The colonel smiled again. "Because he's interfering with my business. Sheriff Thompson is an amateur. His methods are crude, they draw too much attention. I need someone more discreet in the position." Michael understood immediately what was happening. "You don't want justice. You just want to replace one corrupt man with another who works for you." "Exactly. And you're going to help me do that." "And if we refuse?" The colonel's expression hardened. "That would be a shame. You've made a lot of enemies lately. The sheriff, of course, but also some other people who don't like folks poking their noses where they don't belong. It'd be a real pity if something happened to you, or that beautiful baby." The veiled threat was clear to everyone. Rebecca held her son tightly. Michael clenched his fists in anger. "You have until tomorrow to decide," said the colonel, standing up. "David will stay here to receive your answer." After they left, Rebecca and Michael sat in silence for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. "We're trapped," said Rebecca. "Yes, but we still have the documents, and we still have Judge Harrison on our side. Do you think we can trust him too? He's our only option. We have to try reaching him without anyone knowing." They spent the night planning their escape. Michael knew the area well, and remembered back roads they could use to reach the judge's town undetected. Early in the morning, before dawn, they slipped out through the hotel's back window and fled in a wagon Michael had borrowed from an acquaintance. The journey was tense. Every noise, every person they passed on the road made them fear they'd been discovered. Rebecca tried to keep the baby quiet while Michael drove the wagon as fast as he could. By the time they reached Judge Harrison's house, it was already night. The elderly man greeted them with surprise and concern. "You two look terrible. What happened?" They told him everything about Cornelius Blackwell, the blackmail, the threat. The judge listened with an increasingly grave expression. "Cornelius Blackwell is indeed a dangerous man, but you did the right thing coming to me. Now you're under my protection." "What about the documents? Can we still use them against the sheriff?" "Not only can we, but we must. And now we have additional evidence, Blackwell's attempt at blackmail. This proves there's a web of corruption even larger than we imagined." The judge explained he'd spoken with other magistrates and prosecutors in the region, all willing to support a full investigation into the land fraud. "We'll conduct a coordinated operation. We'll arrest the sheriff, investigate the colonel, and ensure all those wronged recover their property. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing. In the following days, the judge carefully organized everything. First, he sent officers from other districts to arrest Sheriff Thompson. The man was caught off guard in his office, trying to burn incriminating documents. Then Cornelius Blackwell's home was searched. They found more evidence of corruption, fake contracts, bribes to public officials, even written threats against those who opposed him. Rebecca and Michael followed every step, giving their testimonies and presenting the evidence they'd gathered. Finally, after months of struggle, justice was being served. But the biggest surprise came when attorney David Williams was interrogated. Pressured by the evidence, he confessed something no one expected. "I wasn't just working for the colonel," he said. "I was trying to gather evidence against him. I'm an investigator for the Attorney General's office, working undercover for 2 years. Michael almost fell off his chair. "What do you mean?" "Colonel Blackwell had been under investigation for a long time. We needed concrete proof of his criminal activities. When we found out about you, about the documents you had against the sheriff, we saw an opportunity." "So it was all an act?" "Not exactly. The threat he made against you was real. He really wanted those documents and was fully prepared to hurt you if necessary. But I was recording everything, collecting evidence." Rebecca was furious. "So you used us as bait?" David lowered his head, clearly embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I know it was dangerous, I know you were scared. But it was the only way to get the proof we needed to arrest not just the colonel, but the entire corruption network in the region." Judge Harrison stepped in. "What matters is that we now have enough evidence to put an end to this corruption, and you'll be compensated for everything you've been through." It took a few weeks for all the legal proceedings to be resolved. Sheriff Thompson was sentenced to several years in prison for forgery, extortion, and corruption. Colonel Blackwell received an even harsher sentence, including the forfeiture of all illegally acquired properties. All falsified deeds were nullified, and the lands were returned to their rightful owners. Rebecca not only got her ranch back, but also received compensation for the damages she suffered. But perhaps the biggest change was personal. During all those months of struggle, Rebecca and Michael had grown closer and closer. What had started as a partnership of necessity had turned into something much deeper. One afternoon, after all the legal troubles were settled, they sat on the ranch porch, watching little Richard crawl through the grass. "You know, Michael, I've been thinking a lot these past few days," Rebecca said. "About what?" "About us. About what happened. About what comes next." Michael looked at her intently. They had avoided talking about personal feelings during the entire ordeal, focused only on solving the legal problems. "I've been thinking a lot too," he said. And I've decided I don't want to live one day at a time anymore. I want to make plans. I want a future." "With who?" Michael smiled, taking her hand. "With you, if you'll have me. With you and Richard. If you'll take a widowed ex-lawyer turned ranch hand, who doesn't quite know what he is anymore." Rebecca smiled, tears of happiness in her eyes. "I will. But on one condition." "What?" "That you go back to being a lawyer. That you use your knowledge to help others like you helped me. That you be the voice for those who don't have one, like you once said." Michael considered the offer. During all that time, he had rediscovered his passion for justice, his calling to help the vulnerable. "Then it's settled. I'll open a practice in town. I'll represent small ranchers, hard-working families, people who need someone to fight for them. And I'll help. I'll take care of the ranch, but I'll also help with the practice. I've learned a lot about the law these past few months." They married in a simple ceremony at the town church, attended by all the families they had helped. Little Richard, now a few months old, served as the ring bearer, carried in the loving arms of his Uncle Joe. Michael's practice flourished quickly. His reputation as an honest, capable lawyer spread throughout the region. He never charged more than people could afford, and often worked for free for families in need. Rebecca proved to be the perfect partner, both in life and in work. She managed the ranch with skill, raised her son with love, and still found time to help Michael with the most complex cases. 2 years after Richard was born, a girl arrived, whom they named Hope. The family grew happy and united, turning the ranch into a place of joy and prosperity. The region also transformed. With the end of corruption by the sheriff and the colonel, new businesses emerged, small farmers thrived, and the community became more united and supportive. Michael became a reference in defending the rights of rural workers. He traveled to various towns, always accompanied by Rebecca when possible, fighting injustices and defending the weakest. On one of these trips, 5 years after they met, they ran into Betty, the gossipy neighbor who had visited Rebecca at the very beginning. "Rebecca, my dear," the elderly woman said, "what a transformation. Who would have thought that scared, pregnant widow would become one of the most respected women in the region? Life teaches us many things, Betty. It teaches us not to give up, even when everything seems lost." And Dr. Michael, who would have guessed that runaway Cowboy was a trained lawyer? Michael smiled. Life also teaches us not to judge people by appearances. Sometimes, those who seem most in need have the most to offer. Years passed, and Rebecca and Michael's story became legend in the region. People came from far away to seek help from the lawyer who had started as a runaway cowboy and the woman who had faced corruption alone and pregnant. Young Richard grew up hearing the story of how his parents met, how they fought injustice, how love could bloom in the hardest of circumstances. When he turned 18, he decided to follow in his adoptive father's footsteps and study law. Hope chose agronomy, wanting to modernize and expand the family ranch. Rebecca and Michael grew old together, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and the gratitude of hundreds of families they had helped over the years. Their ranch became a symbol of resilience and hope, a place where justice had triumphed over corruption. One Sunday afternoon, now grandparents, they sat on the same porch where they had once talked about the future decades earlier. Michael held Rebecca's hand, watching their grandchildren play in the garden. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. "Like what?" "Knocking on my door that night, getting me involved in all those troubles." Michael smiled, bringing her hand to his lips to kiss it tenderly. "That was the best decision of my life. You saved me, Rebecca, brought me back to life. We saved each other, and we saved our community too. That's true. We proved that unity is strength, that truth always defeats lies, that love can grow in the hardest of circumstances." Rebecca looked at the ranch deed, framed on the porch wall. It was the same document the sheriff had tried to forge, now properly registered in her and Michael's names. "You know what makes me happiest?" she said. "What?" "Knowing our children and grandchildren will grow up in a fairer world because of what we did, that other families won't go through what we did. And knowing true love exists, even when it begins in the unlikeliest of circumstances." They sat in silence for a few minutes, savoring the peace of the evening, the sound of children playing, the feeling of a life well lived. The sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in golden hues. It was the same sun that had witnessed their first conversation, their first suspicions about the sheriff, their first feelings for each other. "Michael," Rebecca said softly. "Yes? Thank you." "For what?" "For coming into my life when I needed you most. For teaching me that I'm stronger than I thought. For giving me a new family without making me forget the old one. Thank you, Rebecca. For taking me in when I was lost. For believing in me when no one else did. For showing me it's possible to start over, even after losing everything." Little Richard, now a young lawyer, approached the porch holding a letter. "Mom, Dad, there's a letter from Washington, D.C. It's from the Department of Justice." Rebecca and Michael exchanged curious glances. Michael opened the letter and read silently, his expression gradually changing. "What is it?" Rebecca asked. "It's an honor. The government wants to recognize us for our contributions to justice in the region. They want to award us a Civil Merit Medal." "I can't believe it. It says here our story inspired changes in legislation regarding rural property crimes, that other states are implementing programs based on our work." Hope, now a successful agricultural engineer, joined the group. "You deserve it, Mom and Dad. You've changed so many lives." "We just did what we thought was right," Rebecca said, ever modest. "Sometimes doing what's right is the hardest thing in the world," Michael replied. And sometimes it's also the most important. The award ceremony took place a few months later in the capital. Rebecca and Michael traveled with their entire family, including their young grandchildren. During the ceremony, when Michael was called to the stage to receive the medal, he asked to say a few words. "This honor isn't just mine, but belongs to the whole community that believed justice was possible. It belongs to my wife Rebecca, who taught me that courage has no gender or age. It belongs to all the families who had the bravery to report corruption despite the risks." He paused, looking at Rebecca in the audience. "But most of all, this medal is proof that love and justice can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. When two people unite for a just cause, they can move mountains." The audience applauded, moved. Rebecca had tears in her eyes, proud of the man she had chosen to share her life with. Back at the ranch, they hung the medal in the living room, next to family photos and documents marking their fight for justice. "You know something funny?" Rebecca said one morning as they prepared breakfast together. "What? If you hadn't shown up that night running from the sheriff, I probably would have lost the ranch. I'd be working as a laborer on land that was once mine. And if you hadn't given me shelter, I'd probably still be wandering the world, aimless, without family, without hope." "So was it fate?" Michael stopped stirring his coffee and hugged her. "I don't know if it was fate. I just know it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I know that even if we had to go through it all again, I'd choose the same path. Even knowing all the dangers, all the hardships. Especially knowing, because going through all that showed us what we're capable of. It showed us true love. It let us build a family, a community, a legacy." Rebecca smiled, feeling completely happy and fulfilled. "So you wouldn't change a thing?" "Just one thing." "What?" "I'd have asked you to marry me sooner," he said, kissing her tenderly. Later that day, as they walked through the ranch, admiring the improvements they'd made over the years, they encountered Joe, now very old, but still sharp and active. "Joe," Rebecca greeted him. "How are you doing?" "Just fine, my dear, just fine. I was just thinking about how much has changed since that night you two came together in my barn." "Do you regret helping us?" Michael asked. "Regret it? Son, it was the best decision I ever made. Seeing justice being served, seeing families reclaim their land, seeing the two of you building a beautiful life together, that's priceless." "And your family, Joe? Did your children thrive too?" "Everyone's doing well, thank the Lord. My oldest son started a business in town. My daughter Rose married a good man and gave me beautiful grandchildren. Life improved for everyone after the corruption ended." They talked for a while about the old days, the changes in the region, and their plans for the future. When they said goodbye to Joe, Rebecca and Michael continued their walk through the ranch, visiting every corner that held a special memory. "Do you still remember the first night you slept in the barn?" she asked. "How could I forget? I was terrified, didn't know who to trust, thought my life was over. And I was scared to death for letting a stranger onto the property. I stayed up all night wondering if I'd made the right decision." "But you had." "Yes, I had, but I only realized that later." They stopped at the spot where the original barn had stood, now renovated and turned into a community library Michael had built for the region. "I like to think this is where our story truly began," Michael said. "Our love story or our fight for justice? Both. One wouldn't exist without the other." Rebecca looked at the library building, where local children came to study, where adults learned to read, where young people prepared for the future. "Richard would be proud," she said, referring to her first husband. "You think so?" "Absolutely. He always said education was the only way to change the world. And look what we've done here." Michael held her hand as he always did when he needed to show affection. "Do you think he would have approved of our marriage?" It was a question Rebecca had never asked herself directly, but had always lingered in her thoughts. "I think so. Richard was a good man who wanted my happiness above all else. And you've made me happy, Michael. Happier than I ever thought I could be again. Sometimes I feel guilty for being happy, for finding a new family after losing my first. Don't. Life isn't about replacing what we've lost. It's about honoring what we had and staying open to what may come." They reached the main house of the ranch, where they now lived surrounded by children, grandchildren, employees treated like family, and constant visitors seeking legal help, or just wanting to hear the couple's famous story. On the porch, they found a surprise. The oldest grandchildren had prepared a party to celebrate Rebecca and Michael's 25th wedding anniversary. "Surprise!" the children shouted as they approached. The party was simple, but full of love. Neighbors, friends, and families they'd helped over the years all came to celebrate not just the marriage, but everything the couple meant to the community. During the party, many gave emotional speeches, sharing how Rebecca and Michael had changed their lives, bringing hope where there'd been despair and justice where there'd been corruption. When it was Rebecca's turn to speak, she stood up, moved. 25 years ago, I was a pregnant widow, alone and afraid of the future. Today, I'm a fulfilled woman, a mother, grandmother, happy wife, and part of a community that believes in justice and love. She looked at Michael. All of this started when a desperate man knocked on my door asking for help. I could have refused, I could have been afraid, I could have shut myself off from the world, but something told me to trust, to help, to open my heart. And it was the best decision of my life, because sometimes when we help someone, we end up helping ourselves. When we open our home to someone in need, we end up opening our hearts to love. The audience applauded, deeply moved. Michael stood up and kissed his wife tenderly. "My turn," he said. 25 years ago, I was a lost man, without direction, without hope. I had lost my family, my career, my faith in humanity. Rebecca didn't just give me shelter. She gave me a reason to live again. She showed me it was possible to start over, to fight for a better world, to love again. Together, we discovered there's no greater strength than the bond between two people who believe in a just cause. We learned that true love isn't just about romance. It's about building something good together, about leaving the world a little better than we found it. He paused, looking around at everyone present. This celebration isn't just ours. It belongs to all of you who believed in us, who fought alongside us, who helped us build a community based on justice and love. Thank you for being part of our story. The party went on late into the night. There was music, dancing, plenty of food, and above all, so much love and joy. When everyone had finally left and the house grew quiet, Rebecca and Michael sat on the porch, as they always did after important days. "It was a beautiful celebration," she said. "It was, but you know what moved me the most?" "What?" "Seeing how many lives we've touched. How many people are happy today because we once decided to fight for justice. And to think it all started with a desperate plea for shelter. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest gestures." Rebecca rested her head on Michael's shoulder, feeling the peace that only comes when you know you've lived a life with purpose. "Michael, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "That first night, when you slept in the barn, I dreamed you'd stay. Not forever, of course, but for a while. I woke up thinking it was just a silly dream. And I dreamed I'd find a new family. When I woke up, I thought I was just wishing for too much. Then our dreams came true. The best dreams always do, when we have the courage to fight for them." Years later, when Michael turned 70 and Rebecca 68, they decided to write a book telling their story. They wanted to leave a record for future generations, proof that justice is possible, that love can bloom in the unlikeliest of circumstances, that it's never too late to start again. The book became a success, not just in their region, but across the country. Schools began using their story as an example of citizenship and courage. Law schools included their case in studies about access to justice. Invitations to speak came from everywhere, but Rebecca and Michael preferred to stay on the ranch, welcoming visitors and continuing their work to help the local community. "We don't need to leave here to change the world," Michael often said. "We can change the world by changing our little corner of it." The end. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of this story of love and courage? Do you believe Rebecca made the right choice when she opened her door to Michael that night? Share in the comments how this story touched your heart and where you're watching from. Your opinion means so much to us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss other inspiring stories like this one.